Welcome to Try This at Home. I'm Cliff Bumgardner.
And I'm Harrison Stewart.
Our myths this week are Elevator of Death and Levitation Machine. This episode originally aired October 6th, 2004. Directed, as always, by Peter Rees. Harrison, why don't you kick us off with overall thoughts this week?
Best episode yet.
Nice. I'm really excited to hear you say that.
I loved it. It was super fun to me. I'm wondering when, because I feel like I say that every 3 to 4 episodes, but I don't know. We're getting closer and closer to that original formula. That original recipe, which I have been oh so craving.
I'm really glad to hear you say that you liked it that much. I had, with this episode, a unique experience that I think is a first for me in the watch of the show, this is the most nostalgic I have ever felt watching an episode of the show. I'm not sure why. I think this episode was replayed a lot, which makes sense because it is great and it's got a little bit of everything in it, so I can see that. But when I think about being a kid, we've talked about this before, there being like a sick day, home from school, watching Mythbusters on the couch. This is one of the episodes that comes to mind. I knew every line before they said it. I knew what was happening. And so I'm not going to lie, I got a little wistful watching this episode and thinking about the fact that we're now doing this show and getting to talk to, people like Adam and Robert and Heather Joseph Witham and all these great people. So I think I have fewer notes on this episode than any that we've done so far because I kind of just sat back and watched it as a fan.
Oh, so Cliff.
I know. I don't know if it's going to make a great podcast, but I enjoyed it.
Oh, I doubt it. But
yeah, it's horrible for this business venture we're in, but it was great for me.
I was great as a fan. As a fan.
It really is. It's a great It's another one of those, just like it has a little bit of everything. Interesting that they go back to 2 myths in this episode. Yeah. We've been seeing a lot more than that recently, even doing mini myths where you have a whole bunch, but this goes back to kind of the original format, and it really works. This is a good one.
It's delightful. It has everything. I feel like the biggest one with both of these myths, the biggest thing about them is that they can be solved in a matter of minutes. Yeah. If we chose to do that.
It's a great point.
But instead, we choose to show the audience just some delightful... this episode is chock full of little clips that will appear later in the series and throughout the opening reels of episodes. It's just good. It's good myth busting.
That is such a great point about how these myths could have been over quickly, because I feel like that's what we talked about so much last season, of they would tee up these myths and then just kind of walk into them for 5 minutes and explain them away with one test and it was over. And we had that reaction of wait a minute, no, you can stretch that out and test the various pieces of it and you can make this, you can make a whole lot more TV out of it. This is why, right? Yeah. We're getting to that point of the show where this is the show firing on all cylinders and we're seeing them do that. And it takes 2 myths that last season might have been tacked on at the end of an episode or something. And now they are, just 2 myths taking an entire episode up. It's great.
We're dropping elevators down shafts. We're floating above the ground. We're competing.
I hadn't thought about the theme from dropping to rising.
Yeah.
I bet that wasn't a thing. And I'm just trying to make something out of it, but it sounds good.
Well, I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing. So thank you for making something out of it. Per usual on the show. Per usual.
Myth 1, levitation machine.
Yes.
This is an interesting one, a little bit different from something we've seen before on the show. The basic myth here, the question is, can you make a homemade hovercraft? And this comes from a story apparently about being able to buy plans for a homemade levitation machine that you could make completely out of household parts and build at home. And they want to see if that is something that can actually be done. Did you notice right off the jump, they say, this is another one from the Discovery fan site. And I thought, we haven't heard anything about the Discovery fan site. What do you mean another one?
No, they brought that up very casually for, I wonder if that is actually from a later episode.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't know the order
Right.
of these. This has been the bane of Cliff's young existence.
Yep.
But they acted like I wonder if the website was where people were sending in the ones that they wanted retested, and that's what that's in reference to. But no, I noticed that as well.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because we're still pre-social media, so we're not in the place of people like just tweeting them ideas or whatever, as that would come to be in the future of the show. So interesting to start to hear though a little bit more about like fan interaction and fans sending in myths, because I remember that a lot. And so far we haven't seen much of that other than, like you said, Myths Revisited, which was interesting. This is also an interesting myth in that it kind of goes to, they do this a few times on the show, but it's of a very certain time of like magazine ads and that kind of thing, these weird sorts of things. Had you ever heard of anything like this before with the, buy it, do it yourself, make some mystical invention kind of thing?
Yeah. These are really big in like comic books as well, like the X-ray glasses and stuff. In fact, they say magazine, but I'm fairly certain that I've seen this exact ad in a comic book before.
Oh, really? Like we're talking like Silver Age kind of comic book?
Silver, maybe gold. Like, it's old.
Wow.
Where they like just were not vetting anything. You could just advertise willy-nilly.
Yeah.
But
now we call that the internet.
That's right. Yes, we've gotten no better at making sure that that's not out there. No better. Yeah, one could argue we've gotten worse at it.
The modern version of this is just an Instagram ad. Just like buy a levitation machine on Instagram and have it sent to your house.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, essential oils.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh no, I hope this isn't the one episode my mom decides to listen to. Sorry, Mom.
We've graduated from levitation
glasses to essential
and levitation
oils.
machines to essential oils. Man, the world keeps getting more boring.
We used to be a real country.
Well, to do this, obviously, we're going to get a shopping montage, and because they need to go get some vacuums. So they go to a vacuum shop, unless you think that is the most boring possible place for a television show, which I did, until you meet Vacuum Man, Pete Anderson.
Did you notice?
Right off the jump.
Did you notice that when they introduce him, the most sinister music is playing in the background?
Yes, because what is he doing behind that wall?
What's he doing? Back? And then they take us back there, and it's just nothing. But
I was imagining some like Dexter stuff, like there's plastic up the walls.
Yes. Yeah, he's like vacuuming out someone's guts, like.
It did make me think that our rogues gallery of Silver Age comic book villains is really coming together on the show. We've got Dr. Eel, and now we've got Vacuum Man.
And now we've got Vacuum Man.
Vacuum Man.
It's one. Yes, it's one. It's a Magneto situation. You purposefully pronounce it incorrectly.
And of course, they're using this sequence to get their vacuums to show how vacuums work. They're going to fire up a vacuum motor, and of course, Adam immediately sticks his mouth on it. The show is like 3 minutes old, and Adam has already hurt himself. That is how quickly as I just delivered it to you, is how quickly the show delivered it to us.
It's so true, because it also, like, you could tell that the Vacuum Man was not expecting that at all.
No,
he was just like, here, you're a trained professional. I'm sure you won't put this you put it in your mouth. You put it right on top of your mouth, and now you're bleeding.
Your show starts
with,
yourself? Don't try this at home. We're what you call experts. And 3 minutes in, one of the experts sticks his mouth in a vacuum cleaner.
I don't know if this was intentional. I would love to believe it is, but actually I noticed, because I watch it with subtitles, experts was in quotation marks this week. That was again, and it hasn't been like that before. So
I want to believe that's intentional. That's too good.
I do too. I want to believe that some brave intern out there was having a good ha-ha It slipped in that joke.
Well, it does speak to, I was actually really glad to hear Adam cop to what we have been talking about since the very beginning of the show, which is it is hilarious to watch Adam hurt himself when he
100%.
says,
Dude, this is a show. It's like 4 minutes of science and then 10 minutes of me hurting myself.
Yeah.
it's like, I'm just glad you know. I'm just glad you're self-aware and you know that that's a large part of the show. And it's also not the last time in this episode he's going to hurt himself.
No. So a fun thing for me as we have done this podcast is that initially I would send you all of the clips that I wanted pulled so that we could play them on the show. It's now gotten to the point where the fun game for me is trying specifically to guess which ones you won't have already pulled. And that was one that the second he said, I was like, I don't even need to send this to Cliff. Cliff is going to like, that's going to
I was all over that.
Yeah.
I was all over that one. They end up buying an entire pickup truck full of old vacuums. And did you notice that our vacuum man, Pete, comes to life?
Yes.
Like he's very quiet and kind of demure until they buy what must be hundreds of dollars worth of old vacuum cleaners. And he's just like slinging them out the door. Hey, come back, tell your friends. Hey.
And then he's just their best friend.
He's his best.
Yeah.
Well, the myth itself actually states that kind of the framework that they're going off of here is, can you make a levitation machine from 3 motors specifically? So they're trying to use just 3 homemade vacuums to make it. And it's actually a really great little building sequence that they do early on because they tear the vacuums apart, make a machine, and it just works right away.
It does.
We don't normally, even the narrator, even Robert Lee calls it a very un-Mythbusters moment until Adam hurts himself again, of course. But
and then it's super Mythbusters.
And then it's very Mythbusters. But it is amazing that pretty much right away I was like, oh, this is not as crazy. Because I thought this was crazy. We haven't actually been registering our guesses lately, but my first thought on this was, no, that's bonkers. That's not going to work. Works right away.
Yeah. It also made me want to have them test some of those other things like the X-ray glasses and be like, well, if that one works, like maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the token one that does work, you know, like that's the one, that's the seed of the kernel of truth that, that got into this one. Also, why, just a quick aside, why was Heather Joseph with him in a stairwell?
Looking directly up at the camera?
Looking directly up at the camera. Very funny cut because she's looking down at first and then they have her look up and then they cut it to above as if it's the same shot. It's just like,
that is the one part of the show. That's the one part of the show that has maintained some of the weirdness from the pilots. Remember how weird some of the angles and shots and stuff were in the pilot? Whenever they go to Joseph Witham, it immediately goes back to that vibe, and they're just like, we're in the Matrix.
Yeah.
You're going to be looking up from here, and the camera's going to move around. It's so weird and takes, like, I love her. She's still great on the show, but the way they shoot it completely takes me out of what's going on.
Well, it's funny because, I mean, it's almost like they're implying, like, well, you know, what she's saying is not interesting in and of itself. So we've got to make it's like, I don't know. I think she's got some pretty hot takes here, actually. Like, this is
It is. Maybe that thing was like, we're going to make this as unscience-y as possible. We have the science and we got the cool.
Well, it just made me think about like how funny it would be to watch like a Burns documentary or something, and like every time they go to a historian, he's like looking up, like. So anyway, in the Second World War, they
dressed like Neo and just
yes. He does a little twirl on the sidewalk.
I know Civil War history. We should focus for a second. We kind of glossed over Adam hurting himself again on the hovercraft, but this moment felt a little different to me.
He seems to really hurt himself.
That's the thing. We've seen Adam, I mean, just moments ago, we saw Adam hurt himself, but it's usually pretty funny, and he kind of immediately cops to like, oh, that was dumb. This time he falls on the hovercraft and just like bends backwards over the like wooden board on the edge of the hovercraft and just is like laying there unable to do anything for a second. It is one of the most violent little moments we've yet seen on the show. And of course, Jamie walks over and goes, "You gonna lie there for a minute?"
And like he just kind of groans.
Yeah.
And the camera like zooms in on him, like, ha ha. Ha. I think what was going on is that the rest of the cast was assuming, like we were, that it was another ha ha, and he's like, this isn't a ha ha, this isn't a ha ha. Oh no.
It reminded me, have you ever seen the video of the news anchor who was mashing grapes and
Of
falls?
course. Yeah.
And the sound that she makes, thankfully she was okay, which is why it's funny, but she gets the wind knocked out of her. So instead of oh my goodness, all you hear is, ah! That's what this reminded me of. It's just immediately Adam's just like, oh God,
Yeah.
this is not normal.
Oh man. It really is a wind knocked out of you. Gotta sit here for a second. Give me a minute.
Give us a minute on that one. They go ahead here and tee up a part early on in this myth. They kind of tee up a question that to me defines this myth. And as much as I love this episode, this was my one kind of, I don't know how we feel about this, so I wanted to run it by you. Mm-hmm. They say early on that you can call a hovercraft a levitation device. Does a hovercraft square with what comes to your mind when you think of levitation? Is my question.
Yes, but only because it's not like levitation. Levitation is like boring flying, you know? I've never.
Well, you didn't watch Aladdin as a kid, did you?
That's a flying carpet. Flying is in the freaking name, Cliff.
But you just said levitation is just boring flying. The carpet's just levitating and flying.
But it's showing him a whole new world.
Our first podcast fight is going to be over Aladdin.
How boring the rug is. Yeah. First of all, it's a carpet, okay? Check yourself. Second of all, no. No, I get the it is weird how quickly Jamie is like, of course it is. You know, It's like I don't know about that.
Well, and it also, the reason I wanted to bring it up is it does come back. By the time we get to the end of the myth, they are kind of like wishy-washy on whether or not the crafts that they make can really be considered levitation machines. And that's why, for me, when I hear levitation, I think of one of those desk things that's like a magnet based and it makes like a rock float in the air. Like I think of nothing above, nothing beneath. Right?
Okay.
That to me is like levitation. I think
you can run like
it's a sand speeder in Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what's in my head when I think levitation. Hovercraft, sure, it's you're floating on a pocket of air, but there is contact with the ground. And so for my brain, that was not quite squaring with levitation.
But
it's a thin distinction.
Fair. Now I'm wondering when hovercrafts were like invented and popularized, because it could just be the fact that like this ad probably predated the concept of a hovercraft, right?
That's true. That's true.
Because I'm especially thinking that this was like World War II era, maybe a bit after when this ad started.
That's kind of how it looked. Yeah.
But look, we can both agree right here and right now that what we today call a hoverboard doesn't hover nor levitate.
No,
that's the real BS. We could agree on that.
That's the real enemy here. Yeah, 100%. When I first heard, because I feel like we were probably still in our, I don't know, mid-teens when those started to come out or whatever, when the hoverboards first. Yeah. I remember hearing hoverboard and I was like, finally! Like, oh man, the future has finally delivered on its promise. And then I saw one and I was like,
too. Like,
I saw one and I was like, that's a complicated scooter. Like what?
It's a marginally less geeky Segway. Is what that is.
Yes.
Marginally, by the way.
Marginally.
I cannot stress the fact that it's only marginal.
So while we were talking, I actually looked up the definition of the word levitation, and I don't think this makes it any better for us.
Okay.
This just makes it more complicated.
Okay.
Here's from the Oxford Dictionary. Levitation is the action of rising or causing something to rise and hover in the air, typically by means of supposed magical powers.
That complicates it for a few reasons.
It has the word hover in it.
It has
and
the word
also-
hover in it.
And it introduces magic
It
to the equation.
introduces the concept of magic, which has not been touched upon in this world of Mythbusters yet.
No.
I'm gonna go different. I think I'm with you now. I think a levitation device and a hovercraft are separate entities.
I think a levitation device has to involve Chris Angel, is basically where I'm landing on this.
Oh, he does
You know?
come. No. David Copperfield, I think
He does
gets
too,
a
yeah.
shout out in this episode.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
He sure does.
It's like, and he rises in the air just like David Copperfield. It's something to that effect. I'm sure it was more clever.
Well, we get in this episode our first real Adam and Jamie build off. We've seen this a little bit before where they couldn't agree on something and so they each made something, but this is the first time like it's a planned structure of the show. Am I right? Like I feel like it's the first time we've seen that as the like main structure.
A build off, yes. I think the first proper competition was the goldfish. We did see that.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
That was
I didn't
super
think
fun.
about the goldfish.
But they didn't have to build. There weren't like parameters, which of course
Right.
they immediately eschew.
They cheat right away.
Of course. Which I love how early on that's established. Like this is the
Yes.
first proper build off, and they're already just like ignoring the rules. Fantastic.
Everything goes to the wind.
Fantastic.
Great. They've split into two teams. Adam's team is Adam, Tori, and Christine. Jamie's team, Jamie, Scotty, and Carrie. The idea is they're going to have
Heinemann's Heroes.
Heinemann's Heroes. They have $500 in 2 days to build machines and pit them against each other. But at the beginning of this, if you previous knowledge notwithstanding, if you had to bet on one of these teams, who would be your go-to?
Heinemann.
I hate to agree. I love Adam and Tori and Christine, but right
course.
away I was like, Jamie's going to kill this.
Absolutely.
And he's got a metal fabricator, and he has Carrie who can do everything.
Yes, but one of the weird things about Jamie's design is I feel like he had far more of a foolish, not idea, but use of money right at the outset than Adam
This is
did.
true. This is true.
Like they both, it was very funny to me that in both of the designs, they immediately blew their load.
Yeah.
It was not, the very first thing that they did was make unnecessarily large purchases, on things that I was not perfectly convinced were absolutely necessary for the functionality of the thing.
And they both immediately give up the idea of a vacuum, too.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
just gone, and they go to leaf blowers straight away, which they don't even necessarily call that the cheating. The cheating comes later, but I was kind of like, well, this whole experiment, like in terms of the myth, this is just to watch these two teams have fun, which I'm fine with, but like it was an
Totally
immediate
fine.
diversion from where we've been going.
Totally fine. I absolutely love that they spent a lot of money with Vacuum Man.
Yeah.
Only to not use
Only to not use them.
only to use like one of them.
Yeah, well, they
Maybe?
used 3 to make that initial machine because that was the thing. And then,
3.
yeah, the vacuums are immediately gone.
Yep.
Didn't need any of that. And now we're on to $1,000 between the two teams to do this again, which honestly, $500 for what a piece, even though they end up overspending a little bit, like that's not that bad considering.
I do think Tori says something. One of them is like, wait, so we're not doing the vacuum, we're just completely ignoring.
Yep. We're just ignoring the
Adam's like, yes,
entire
of course
concept
we are.
of our television show.
Yeah, and then it switches to Jamie, who's like, "Yes, of course we are." Like it's very funny how both of them just immediately are like, "That's stupid."
What did you think of the design? So we should walk through. Jamie's plan is a surfboard that has basically a bladder on the bottom of it. Pretty elegant solution that they end up making. It's almost like a what do they call those standing boards? Now that you see at the beach all the time, like it's almost one of those where it has an outrigger.
Paddleboard.
It's kind of like a paddleboard sort of design that he builds out of a surfboard with an outrigger. Very clean, very Jamie, very simple. Adam's is a contraption.
Yes.
Adam's is this lily pad like thing with 3 inflated bladders and a chair. And like you just kept adding stuff on. There's just more weight and more metal, and you just constantly just sparks flying. And I was like, how is this ever gonna float in any way. But what I loved about this was that each of the designs gives us like an icon of their brains. Jamie's is like streamlined and simple and kind of like stylized in a way, and Adam's is overbuilt monstrosity but really fun, and they end up putting flames on it, and it's just like insanity. It was great.
Yeah. But the two like big purchases that I was talking about, they have to buy a surfboard.
Yes.
And apparently blow like half the budget just on a surfboard.
And I'm an inside boy, but I did not know surfboards were quite that expensive.
Oh yeah. Big time. Especially if you like get them like brand spanking new from a place that's all that they do.
In California,
which they do. So it was like, oh man, that's gonna cost you. And then Adams is like, he buys like the most expensive leaf blowers on the market, just because he wants the part of it where like you can control it. Like there's a little controller that has like
it looks like a jetpack. It just looks like a jetpack.
It does look like, specifically like. Have to get in my James Bond reference of the
Here we go.
Specifically like the From Russia with Love jetpack, like the super old school one.
Yes. Yeah, that was great. I mean, the visuals on each of these were fantastic, but on both of them I thought, I don't know if this is actually gonna work at all.
I also have never heard Jamie laugh like he did in this episode, because like in order they're gonna put a rig on the back of the surfboard, and it's just got like the 3 leaf blowers lined up on the back. So initially they do set it up like a jetpack, where
and
they
he puts
like
rollerblades on.
And he puts freaking rollerblades on and just like goes zooming through the M5. It's just like
it reminded me, you remember like early in season 1 there was that like little interstitial where Jamie's on like some sort of rollerblades and he's just like, hi, welcome to the Busters, I'm Jerry. It crashes. It reminded me of that. It was the same kind of thing, except this time Jamie's like in control. He really had it down.
It was the drill powered.
Yes, I think it were drill powered rollerblades. Which I think if I'm not mistaken, these are the same rollerblades in this episode, because there was like a modification on them. There was like some sort of thing on the side looked like it had been made. So I think it might have been the same ones, and they just took the drills off.
I'm pretty sure he never gets rid of anything, assuming they don't immediately break it, like like the death ray.
Yes, yeah, just destroy it out of spite.
Yeah.
Adam's entire rig, the problem with it is that it's just really too heavy. It's just too heavy. It's too big and too complicated. So he needs a bigger fan, which leads to one of the scariest contraptions we've yet seen on the show, where he gets a monster fan and a leaf and ends up attaching a
hedge trimmer, I believe.
Yeah, like a hedge trimmer style, like weed whacker motor to this thing inside of a cowling, and it looks like a horrible jet engine. It's terrifying.
Yes. And the cowling is just, I believe, a trash can.
Yes. Yeah, the cowling is a trash can with flames painted on it.
Yes.
And this is where, to what you were talking about earlier, this is where Adam has totally blown his budget.
Yes.
And then Jamie hears about that in his side of the shop and decides, well, of course, we're going to cheat too. So the whole basis of the competition completely gone by this point. I don't care. I'm entertained. But
me too.
Any concept of an actual competition here in the show is gone by this point.
Yeah.
And yet still, Adam's machine doesn't work.
Nope.
After all of this. And did you notice when Jamie's team hears about this and they're talking about it, Carrie says, well, I bet Adam's problem is probably Adam. And I was like, damn.
Shade.
They really.
Shade, Miss Bynum.
They go to lengths in this episode to make Adam out to be like the resident goofball who can't do anything. Meanwhile, he's a brilliant engineer.
Yeah.
But it's like, somehow among that group, I guess that shows you how smart that group is, that among
Wow.
that group, Adam's the silly one.
Yeah.
Like in any other room, he's the smartest person there. But amongst these engineers and builders, he's the one they're all like, you know.
And it's still a good idea. It's just that
Yeah.
like, you know, they couldn't like I feel like if they had a bit more time, they would have been able to be like, oh, you know, we can cut some weight here, 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 and here. I have to imagine it wasn't any of their idea, and it was just like one of the producers like whispering to them like, you know what you should do? You should give Adam wings. What? Yes. Made of pizza boxes. Do it now.
You should just seal the Icarus aspect of this entire expedition in one stark visual. We did get a...
So they did.
So they did. The visual of Adam just flapping maniacally with pizza boxes on it is, like you said, it's one of those that ends up in montages and stuff. It's great. It's just a legendary kind of perfect visual for the insanity of this show.
Well, I particularly liked when they were strapping the pizza boxes onto him, and he's just like, you know, deadpan, looks like he hates us so much, looks directly into the camera, is like, this is going to work. Like, that was such a good...
Yeah, he's at the point where he's not even he's not even trying to act like it hasn't been an abysmal failure anymore. He's just fully embracing it at that point.
Yeah.
Even Christine, who we got to see a lot more of in this episode, I'm surprised. I did remember her on the show, but I didn't remember her being this big a part of the show. I know she's not around very long, but while she's here, man, she's all over the show. And she had a great moment in this where after Adam's machine had just completely failed, they just cut to her and she says,
It's the beautiful thing. We put so much time and love into it and it's not working. And I'm brokenhearted and so is everybody else. And Adam's pouting.
again, Adam the child, Adam the school kid on the thing, just pouting over his horrible levitation death machine that won't work.
Well, it's not a bad description. Like, he is just sitting there in a chair, facing the thing, looking at it, like eating what appears to be pizza.
Yeah.
Just like trying to work it out. But I just love how she tacks on at the end. Like, she's giving this impassioned speech, like, we gave it our all. Blood, sweat, tears went into this mechanism. So for it to not work is really, also Adam's being a bit of a baby, but like, I can't believe that it didn't work. And he's crying in the corner right now. And it's just not fair. Like, her delivery, perfect.
Adam catches throughout this episode back to back to back. He is just catching shrapnel constantly, whether he's hurting himself, whether people are talking about him, or even the editors. There's a moment here where Adam says that he can only pray for one thing, and that's the total failure of Jamie's rig, and they just cut to his rig working perfectly. Even the editors of the show are dunking on Adam. I started to feel a little bit bad at a certain point. Oh,
at least he's cool with it.
Oh yeah, he has embraced that character so fully, and to this day, when we talk to him about it, you know, he's fully embraced that. You know, whatever he needed to be for the show, being that and making himself the butt of the joke.
It works.
So great.
It works.
The final test for this myth for the end of the
Down to
competition,
the race.
yes, is actually out at the beach, which I seemed initially like a good idea. It turns out not to be such a good idea.
Nope.
But here's the thing to me. They immediately say, basically, this has been such a failure, we're going to allow the team members to push the rigs. Which is, I know it's the only way they could get it to work on camera, and they're like, we've spent thousands of dollars and, you know, multiple days on this, and we need it to work. But that was crap.
It was.
That was total crap.
It might as well have been like a shopping cart race at that point.
Right. Like, I know this isn't the Tour de France or anything. I'm not saying that it's like
Cliff, you
something
could
about
cheat in that. You could totally cheat in that.
True. This is true. But I'm not saying that it's like the spirit of competition. It's just like, come on, we've spent this whole time trying to make self-propellant machines, and then they're just going to push them.
Yeah.
Adam did have
Yeah.
really good wings, though. They had actually they'd taken the joke pizza box wings and made legit looking wings out of foam core.
They upgraded big time only for it
Yes.
to not work any better than the pizza wings.
Yes. And like they have a race.
Looks great.
Everything looks great, but it's a complete disaster. They get
Yeah.
stuck in the water. They're falling down. They're having to switch who's pushing and who's riding. I think they said it was like a 200-foot course, and I swear it looks like it takes them half an hour.
Yeah, but
To get
at the
through
same
this thing.
time, like props to the editors on that one. Because
Oh,
like
it's
it
riveting,
does
yeah.
look really tight and close at certain points. And I was
Yeah.
like, this had to have been just like I would love to see the uncut footage of
Yes.
just them very slowly pushing each other down the beach with these loud, obnoxious machines.
Because all this turned out to be was like a really complicated foot race.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that it was. It was a foot race with extra crap in the way.
It was a steeplechase. It was a steeplechase.
And Adam even calls it the stupidest contest ever in the world.
He's not
Which I thought
wrong.
was great. But he
Shockingly.
wins.
Adam wins because Jamie's like goes kaput within inches of the
Yes.
of the finish line.
They do end up doing a rematch on dry land, and Jamie's rig is made for that and totally stomps. Like you actually
Yeah.
do get to see the rig work in the way it's supposed to. But the initial test, the race that counts on the record books, Adam does win, which is, he's got that one for all the beating he took in this episode. Yeah, I mean, this was a fun myth. It was very loose to me in terms of a myth. Like they abandoned the actual sort of parameters pretty quickly. And that's why they come back to it here. They come back and they say, well, the fact is these are hovercraft, not really levitation devices. But in the end, we're going to say that the original construct, can you make some sort of device like this with household vacuums, is plausible but impractical. And that turns out to be their verdict, which I don't disagree with that idea, but I'm still on the side of innate levitation.
Yeah. There's no magic.
You know, if you ordered these plans out of a catalog to build a levitation machine out of 3 vacuum cleaner motors, we showed that you could do it, and I actually got about 6 inches of levitation.
Yeah, but in my mind, it's not really levitation. This is a hovercraft.
Well, I'd say, for the record, this myth is plausible, but totally impractical.
Yeah, plausible but impractical.
Myth 2, elevator of death. Will jumping in a falling elevator save your life?
Cliff,
This is a scary one.
I have 3 recurring nightmares. Right? The first one is that I wake up and I'm like, what day is it? December 26th. I slept through Christmas. Right? That's the first one. Second one is I'm looking up in the sky at an airplane that then very suddenly turns and starts coming towards me and like crashes in the ground nearby.
Oh,
That
wow.
One's, that one's weird. Probably 9/11 related.
Yeah,
I
I
had
was
to
thinking.
guess. And the third one is falling elevator. And I have learned that this is actually a super common recurring nightmare. A lot of people are petrified by the idea of this. And
My dad hates
them.
elevators. My dad hates elevators.
I don't now I do want to say I have gathered that apparently a lot of them now have some kind of thing under them.
Yeah.
Like when they get to the floor, something like juts out underneath. That makes me feel a bit better.
Well, we'll get there, but they do actually go to great lengths in this myth to talk about all of the safety features that have to be disabled to even make this possible, which I thought was cool. I mean, we've talked about this before in some other myths of like when you see how much actually goes into the safety, it kind of makes you feel safer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that what did you think about the myth overall then? I know in the past, like Buried Alive, you were super uncomfortable with.
Yes.
Being this is a fear of yours, what did you think about this one overall?
See, this one had the opposite effect where it made me feel much better because they were going over all the safety features of an elevator from the 20s.
Yeah.
That's
in
100 years ago now.
Busted ass old hotel.
Yes. In an absolutely ruined hotel.
Yeah.
Very, very Tower of Terror-y.
Absolutely. Yeah.
to me. But
Yeah, I thought that was cool that it did kind of, for all of the scariness of this myth, it was actually sort of nice to see how safe elevators really are.
yeah, I mean, like it was just, first of all, I didn't know a whole lot about how elevators worked. I still don't, but like I definitely know more now than I did. But this was the main one that I was thinking of when I said at the beginning of the episode they could have, cleared this in like 5 minutes with
Totally.
an equation, and instead they were like, we're gonna drop an elevator, a real elevator down a real shaft, and God, I respect them for it.
It is such a perfect test for the show. Like
Yes.
the idea, it's complicated, but it's visual and it's cool. Like maybe that's why this one got replayed as much as it did. It's just it works so perfectly well. A little bit of backstory on this one. They say that the story originates from 1945 when an elevator fell 80 floors in the Empire State Building. Yeah. They later come back to that and say, I'm just going to address it here at the top, that the person who was in that elevator was actually saved. She did survive, but it was because partly because the coil of wire that had broken got underneath and acted like a spring, and also the elevator apparently didn't fit really well in the elevator shaft, and so it kind of had friction as it went down and it didn't just drop. But even so, it appears the impression that I got was that story created this myth that the way to survive, or the way this person survived, was by jumping before it hit the ground, and somehow that would, not make physics happen.
Right.
I guess.
Right. This is very similar to like jumping on top of a moving object and like that somehow having like
Well, we've talked about this before on the show, that there are some things like this that have, I think Stephen Colbert would have called it truthiness, right? Where there's that little part of your brain that goes, oh yeah, I see where that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay, the elevator's falling, you're jumping up, the impact hits the ground, you're not touching the ground during the impact, you're not gonna receive it. But of course, however fast that elevator is going, you are going equally fast.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter
in order
if you
to
jump.
even be able to jump up off of that ground.
Yes. Yeah. Which is a part they don't really talk about that much, is how difficult it would actually be to jump while falling.
Yeah.
Would be almost impossible, but I understand that that's a very difficult thing to visualize, and where they ended up going with it was so great that I'm not complaining. But that is a whole other part of this myth that makes it just completely impossible.
Were you equally surprised when they were asking the elevator man? He's not in it long enough to really touch on him, but like, they go to an elevator expert, of course. And they were like, what would you do? And he was like, lie down as flat as possible.
Yeah.
That surprised me.
I guess the theory there is spreading out the impact and also reducing your whiplash, so you're not being thrown down. But I mean, it seems like one of those bend over and kiss your butt goodbye kind of moments if you're in that situation.
No. So that, I love that you said that, because at first when he was like, well, I guess first I'd get down on the ground, I thought he was going to say and pray. Like if I'm in a falling elevator, see ya.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Had a good life. I'd get down on the ground and think about my life as it fell away beneath me. Yeah.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day... It probably wouldn't even... That's the thing. It also, like, it's... I should know this, but it's so much quicker than I was anticipating.
Oh, yeah.
It only takes a few seconds for it to go 9 stories. It's
insanely bad. Yeah. Well, the big part of this myth, or one of the big cool parts of this myth, is that they have to figure out how to make Buster jump.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool... This adds to the Buster mythology. Buster at this point is just fully a part of the show. Mm-hmm. And I even think there's a line where they're like, well, what are we going to do? And Jamie's like, well, Buster's going to have a bad time. Like, that's now... He's the guy that we go to all the time, which was awesome to see.
We're going to stick a coil up his bum.
Yeah, the rig that they make, I loved this. This is one of those, again, I'm on the couch as a kid, takes me right back, because I remember seeing this and thinking it was so cool, that they basically make a turbocharged pogo stick. That's what they call it.
An industrial pogo stick.
For Buster to sit on that is spring activated.
Jam up his butt.
To jam straight up his butt and launch him up into the air. And they do tests to try to get it to be roughly the same speed as a human jump.
That was
to have
so cool.
roughly the same force, which was so cool. Again, we talked about this last season of like, where are all the tests and where's all the figuring out the metric that you're going for? It's all here. It was great. This is exactly why we remember it to be that way. And of course, you called this a week or two ago. How are they going to make that rig work? Bunch of lard.
Kids at home listening, this is the third appearance of lard. I'm really going to do my best to keep a running You know what? I've got a sign on my wall here. I'm going to write lard.
We're going to have a lard counter?
I'm going to have a lard counter.
Third
appearance of lard. Stay tuned. What if we get to 10, I get to dump lard on Cliff. Right? We agreed to that. Pretty sure we agreed to that.
I think we agreed to it right now, live on the air.
Email us if you think that I should be allowed to dump lard on Cliff.
You know what's going to be really sad?
I was about to call you Cliff.
If lard has more appearances than Heather Joseph Witham. Now it's going to make me really sad if by the time we get to the end of the show, lard has outpaced the resident folklorist.
Okay, I'm going to get her tally going to now.
Oh, that's not going to be weird at all. Your wife walks in and what's behind your desk is Heather Joseph Witham and lard.
And lard is winning? What kind of a race is this?
What are you counting?
Don't worry about it.
The other big half of this myth is actually just getting the elevator to work at all. So as you mentioned, they go to this old hotel, the Hotel Royal in San Francisco, and it is a disaster zone.
Yes.
And they are going to make this ancient elevator work, which was super impressive to watch them actually do this and figure out how to make this ancient thing run again. Like it was, again, it's one of those things kind of like in the levitation myth.
Yeah.
The building part of it is not necessarily part of the myth, so to speak. It's not really a test or anything. It's just a step along the way. But man, is it satisfying to watch. The like influx of building we've gotten this season with the build team and the focus that they've put on that, this was awesome.
Yeah. I especially love that they can't initially get the crank to work.
Yes.
And Jamie is just like, oh, I've got something for that. You what? You what?
Of
Well,
course.
it's only in prototype stage. No, not only in prototype. How do you already have something to get the winch working? Like,
and not only does he already have something for the winch, this is 2004, and he made an electric car. That's what they use, is an electric car that Jamie has built. What the hell?
he's just the best. Even
Where's his
Adam-
Iron Man suit? Like,
Yes, it's in there. We're just not allowed to see it.
that's true.
That's all.
It's with the flamethrower in the office.
That's right. We're not allowed in the office. We're not allowed in Papa's office.
Yeah, even Adam is like, even he has to comment on, of course, Jamie just happens to have an electric motor that's capable of powering an elevator shaft.
From the 1920s. Of course he
From
does.
the 1920s.
Why not?
Why
not?
wouldn't you? We just got it up on the wall with all
Well,
boxes of toys and stuff.
You never know when you're going to need to power up an elevator from the 1920s. What?
And he was
Okay,
right.
I guess you were right this one time. Okay, I
Yeah.
guess you were right this once.
Yeah, can't argue with it. He was right. It's crazy. This is where they walked through some of those safety mechanisms. And as they were doing this and they were illustrating what they were having to cut and what they were having going through, I kind of sat back for a minute and I just started thinking about this, one as a test and two as a television show. In that everything has to go so right for this test to work. They are not going to get a second chance because this elevator is old. It is going to fall apart the second it touches the ground. They know that it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
They know that they are just destroying this elevator, but they need to get the shot. They need to actually get the test. And they have to get it all on camera.
Yep.
That's the other part of this that's so crazy. It's one thing. What you see on this show is them figuring out how to actually make this happen. There's this whole other thing happening behind the scenes where they have to figure out how to shoot this and actually make it make some sort of visual sense on camera. This is so complex and it is done incredibly well.
Yeah.
Like that just, I had one of those moments of like sitting back and thinking about how far the show has come here because wow, is this well executed from an engineering standpoint, a testing standpoint, a story standpoint, and a production standpoint to get all of this done. There's no formula for this.
No.
There's no like, oh, this is how you film a falling elevator. Like there's none of that. People haven't done this before, and they're doing it in a reality format on TV. It's crazy. It just makes me appreciate this show so much.
Well, down to something like I kept thinking like, but how are they going to get Buster to jump at the right moment? And they're like, well,
Right.
of course we're going to tie this like cable to this pin that's going to pull it at the exact moment. I was like, this is, and that Cliff, this is why this is the best episode so far for me. I
think you're winning me over to that argument.
It
by
is
the way.
both hilarious in the first myth, right, with the hoverboards,
Yep.
but then it is also, so you have one of the funniest segments that they've had paired with one of the most technically impressive things that they've ever filmed.
Yeah.
So like together, it's just like, this is perfect Mythbusters. This is a perfect episode.
It really is.
It's so
You're
good.
absolutely right. I think you're winning me over to that. I had not thought of this because I was just so lost in the episode. I wasn't really thinking about it in terms of what we've seen before until we were talking about it now. And you're right. I also had in my head, even though I remember this episode really well, I think because of the number of times this sort of thing happens on Mythbusters, I had in my head the pogo stick wasn't going to work in the actual drop. It works perfectly.
Works like a charm.
It all goes off without a hitch. And this elevator dropping is maybe the most violent thing we've ever seen on the show. It is
It's
just
really
like,
bad.
boom, gone. To the point that when it hits, they all have a moment of like, they're not even laughing or responding. Like we've seen them blow something up and then there's like this cathartic laugh or they shoot the chicken cannon and they laugh. This happens, and then Adam genuinely looks like he just got out of a car wreck.
They're
like he has
awestruck.
They're awestruck by the force that they just felt emanate through this building, and they capture it perfectly. It's just what a moment.
Yeah, it's also so good. It's scary and funny at the same time. Like they just have a camera set up facing the elevator shaft on a random floor and just watching it go just how quickly.
Straight through the shot. It's the kind of thing of like, this is what they should use for reference if they make like a Flash movie, you know, is like the violence of speed.
Yes.
And just how destructive it really is. I mean, we should say, even though everything goes off that hitch, obviously the myth is not going to work. Buster is in pieces. He's decapitated. They're pulling out limbs.
This might be the most messed up Buster has been. I even think they say that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from just blowing him apart, I don't know how it could be worse.
No, but even like I'm pretty sure that even the exploding tuba didn't do this much damage. Like this is insane.
Not nearly. Yeah.
He is done for. Do you think they just left the elevator there like that?
I imagine so.
They do specify that they're about to demolish the buildings. Like, why not? You know?
Yeah. I mean, even the high-speed shot, by the way, this is one of the places where high-speed now is part of the visual language of the show, like we've talked about, and it pays dividends because you just see the elevator come down, you see the pogo stick fire, you see Buster go up exactly the way that you would expect, and it don't matter.
And then the floor comes with him, and like the force of the impact is so great. It's like a horror movie when like the camera like jostles and then like goes blank.
It really is something that they illustrate on this show and in future episodes too, but also in things we've seen like the hammer drop when they're dropping Buster into the water.
I thought of that one as well. Yeah.
There's just nothing more violent than falling. You know, like there's just something about you can blow something to smithereens and it is not nearly as visceral as falling, dropping, impact. Gravity. Yeah. It's, oh man. I think overall, the note that I wrote down at the end of this one, I think sums it up nicely is this one felt clean. And by that, I mean, it's just like not a lot gets in the way. There's not a lot of ups and downs, but they're just, they have a plan. You get to see them operate at a really high level and execute.
Yeah.
You made the best point that this paired with Levitation Machine is great because you get to see the comedy of everything going wrong, falling, hurting themselves. Then when they get to this really dangerous, serious thing, they are just operating at a whole other level than we've ever seen before. And it works. They test the myth. They get the result that they're looking for. It's great.
It's just together. It covers the full gamut. You know?
Yeah.
It's everything I want out of Mythbusters in one place this week.
So we gotta add this. You've got your lard list. We also maybe we need a list of best episodes. This is heading up to the top. Like this is there now. When we do our recap at the end of this season, this is a contender already, an early contender. 4 episodes in, and it's an early contender.
This is the thing to beat.
Absolutely. Well, this myth was obviously by the end busted. You can't mess with physics. Physics are gonna physics, man.
Physics will physics you up, bro.
But an absolutely great episode. And I think we're in for another one next week. Ooh. Our myths will be Plywood Builder and Beat the Radar Detector.
Okay.
Another fun pairing of myths. Excited to see that. We hope that you guys will go watch that episode. You can find it on Max or Discovery Plus. There's actually some on YouTube I have found as well. So wherever you can watch the show, we hope that you will watch that and then come back and listen to us break it down. But until then, thanks for listening.
Bye-bye, bubbies.
Try This at Home is produced by Slugline Media. The show is written, hosted, edited, and shot onto the internet by Cliff Bumgardner and Harrison Stewart. Our music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. You can follow the show on Instagram at TryThisPod or email us, trythisathomepod@gmail.com.